Okay.
Fantastic.
I thought I did something wrong. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. So hopefully you should be able to hear us now. And you're hearing us from Monza, the Parkode in Monza, of course. The amazing circuit, the Temple of Speed. 5.7 kilometers, of course, per lap of a high-speed action here. And it's, of course, the host of the 5th round of the VMS Pro Series. Last week, we were, of course, at Circuit de la Sarthe for the 2.4 hours of Le Mans. Here, we're in for a shorter hour-long race, but it's going to be no less filled with incident. I'm certain of that. My name is Edward Hunter, by the way. Alongside me is my co-commentator, Braden Hill, and broadcast director, Nicolaus Domino. So, Braden, the championship is really, really hotting up, of course. Last week we saw dominant win from Simoncic in Hypercar and Sebastian Wunsch getting the jump on Kieran Prendergast. And Prendergast, of course, yet to take that elusive class victory in GD3. But he is starting to extend that overall championship lead, although Sebastian Wunsch is looking very, very threatening in the sprint and endurance sort of subclasses, of course. And, of course, this is the 4th round of the sprint championship this season. We've only 2 more left to go, so we are starting to get into sort of exciting territory there. But of course, Monza, it's a very, very famous track. We saw a lot of action in Contender on Friday with wet conditions and then it drying as both qualifying and the race went on. And it looks like we're in for much more drama tonight.
Yeah, lots of on-throttle time this week. We're going to truly bear witness to the speed and power of these race cars in both classes. We're going to be witnessing really a test of skill as well as patience for these drivers. It's very easy to make a mistake around really any corner of this circuit, and you could very easily wad up a whole host of cars in any particular incident. Add into that mix some interesting weather patterns, a bit of rain falling during practice, the circuit starting to dry out a little bit towards the end. But we'll see just how that weather starts to develop throughout the race and how we get to see some drama, especially we're going to be looking at turn 1, lap 1, as we get started here.
Yeah, and anyone who's watching the Contender Series will remember Tobias Blumschein in his BMW Hypercar had an amazing qualifying, gambled on the dry tyres, and then took pole by half a second right at the death at the end of the session. Then, of course, loaded up for the race, saw that the track was wet again, panicked, didn't select tyres in time and had to start from the pit lane, and that led to a very, very messy race for him. So you can go from 0 to hero and then 0 again just as quickly. You've got to be decisive in these sorts of situations, and you've got to have a fair bit of luck on your side too, for that matter. Now might be a good point then to go through some of our championship standings before we get underway. Here is our the sprint standings first for Hypercars. So that is excluding our endurance rounds at Spa and Le Mans, of course, last week. So David Mrokcek, of course, winner at Interlagos, is leading by 3 points from Michi Hoyer in the BMW, of course, who, of course, won at Sebring. Fabio Gugalado, we saw have that amazing fight back at Le Mans a week ago from last to 4th. He's 3rd in the championship due to Jene Simoncic missing the race at Sebring, and Simoncic actually equal on points with David Levy in the Porsche. So Levy, of course, always sort of sneaking his way into the top 10, it would seem. Aurelian Bru is in 6th with Mario Tump in 7th, equal on points with his Black Hawk Racing teammate Mark Veit. Amos Lorito, the Italian, is 9th, and the top 10 is rounded out by the Ferrari of Marco Di Buono. Di Buono yet to have a particularly great fortune in the sprints. The GD3 sprint standings, Arda Erchan, interestingly, is leading the championship, despite the fact that Arda told me he kind of lost interest and was giving up on this. Matteo Blotto is 2nd, just 3 points behind Arda Erchan. Kieran Prendergast, the perennial podium finisher, always the bridesmaid, never quite the bride so far for Kieran Prendergast, but that could change today. He's 10 points behind the sprint championship lead. Fabien Ballet is on 16 points in 4th, with Sebastian Wunsch, our winner last time out of Le Mans, in 5th. Only 12 points today after his off Interlagos cost him a lot of points early in that race. Erwin Liskowitz is 6th also on 12 points, with Callum Cripps in 7th, equal on points with the Corvette of Elise Buzita. Then it's Louis Gaspar in 9th, with Luca Fingard rounding out the top 10 in his BMW. That's, of course, the sprint standings. But remember, in the overall standings in Hypercar, it's a tie, 96 points each between Jene Simicic and Michi Hoyer, of course. So that it doesn't really get too much closer than that. And Davin Rocher, I think, only within about 10 points of them. And then, of course, it's a 13-point lead for Kieran Prendergast over Sebastian Wunsch in the overall GD3 standings. So, of course, there is prize money for our sprint standings, our endurance standings, and our overall standings as well, in the top 3 in each, Braden. So you might not necessarily be the best endurance driver, but you might be able to make up with it with some aggressive driving in the sprints. That might just be enough to sneak you into the prize money points-paying positions.
Yeah, I think the band of BMW brothers are certainly looking good in all 3 varieties of the championship, that being Michi Hoyer and Jerne Simicic up at the top of the field. They've really been some of our strongest contenders throughout the season. The BMWs in the LMGT3 class, by comparison, though, have struggled mightily on just outright pace. We look now at, I believe this is Luca Thingard we're following along
I
here.
think that's Zach Vermack, actually.
Oh, that might be. I had a 50-50 shot and I lost. So, in any case, the BMWs have struggled mightily on outright pace. We'll see if they're able to make a run for the pole here in a few moments' time. We're witnessing now Michi Hoyer just finishing up a lap and won't quite get all the way around there for the Team WRT BMW V8M Hybrid. So 25 and a half minutes on the clock now. We're going to see our GT3 cars come out on track in just a few minutes time and see just how they fare. Again, it's going to be similar to Le Mans, a lot of on throttle time, a lot of potentially games being played by these drivers to try to get a tow, but not be impeded on any of the chicanes around the course. And it looks like some spray coming off the back of that 95 car, so I have to imagine that this track has just gotten a little bit wet between sessions. That's going to quite easily throw a wrench in these drivers' plans.
Indeed, it could then. So is this another situation where it starts off wet and dries out, and people who are watching Contender will know that this is a 50-50 decision, because if it doesn't dry out enough, then you can find yourself at the very, very back of the field if you gamble on dries. But the safe option being on the wets, it might not be ideal if the track conditions keep changing. So what you ideally want is all the wet runners to sort of clear the track ahead of you, and then you either switch to dries or you wait patiently for the track to dry up enough to get into dry territory, and then you just blitz the field on the final lap where there's no more time on the clock for anybody else to beat your time, essentially. So there is a lot of strategy here. I think slipstream, when it's this wet, the slipstream becomes sort of secondary to just being on the right tires at the right time here. But it'll be interesting to see if this allows our likes of our BMWs and our Corvettes, as we look at Valtteri Manninen, I believe, just going through the first chicane, the Variante del Rettifilio, into the Curva Grande. Turn 3, very, very long right-hander. Manninen, remember, retired right at the start of our race at Le Mans with a big crash, I think, on the first lap, somewhere in the Porsche curves, if memory serves correctly. So Manninen, the Finn, just has not had a great deal of luck on his side compared to the other Corvette of Elise Buzzi. The Canadian has always, the last couple of races, Sebring, where it was very wet, of course, just like here, and Le Mans, he was able to sneak into 5th and 8th in class, respectively, which were his first finishes in the championship, too. So the Corvettes, up until recently, have been really up against the wall. But great to see them finally, both drivers, starting to get top 8 finishes under their belt, as we cut to Fabian Baller, the German, another driver who was joking after Le Mans. Every race I do, I just seem to finish behind Callum Cripps. I could have saved myself a lot of time if you just given me the points behind wherever Callum Cripps finishes. As again, he breaks really, really deep into Rettifilio, and in the wet, Brain, it's so hard to spot your braking points when there's so much water. That sort of means your braking points become naturally much, much longer, and your brakes are less effective, especially at a circuit like Monza, where you arrive at such high speeds and then have to get it slowed down to get through these corners.
Yeah, Fabian having the benefit of nobody ahead of him, but he is kind of the lead of a train of McLarens here, and I do expect keep an eye out on these McLarens. They seem especially stable in the rain compared to some of the other cars. But if Sebring is any sort of reference, obviously a very, very different track, much bumpier and quite a few more corners, especially tight ones at Sebring. But in terms of just the weather, I think the quite formidable pace of the McLarens was no more deterred by the rain than it was at any other circuit we've seen so far this season, and they continue to show that pace with them all in a line. But we'll see if we see the likes of the BMWs and the Corvettes trying to make a run, make up for that pace that they maybe lack in dry conditions, and make up for that with simply attrition at the front of this field.
Yep, certainly you have got to finish the lap, and in these sorts of conditions, it's so easy, especially for a chicane like Ascari that you just saw Fabien Ballet zoom through there. It's so easy to get a wheel on the curb at the wrong moment, and suddenly you're spinning the rear tire, especially the exit of Ascari, where there's all that gravel, and then the wall, of course. We've seen more gravel on the exit of the Parabolica Alboreto, named, of course, after the legendary 80s Italian Ferrari driver, of course, that finished second in the 1985 Formula One World Championship. Sebastian Wunsch, though, beats Ballet's time by 1.3 seconds, and that shows you Wunsch still on a high after his pretty ominous victory. It's like 28 seconds in the lead of Kieran Prendergast come the checkered flag, although Prendergast did have a few screen freezes, admittedly, as he sets a purple final sector, but only good enough to get third fastest because Michel Rodriguez, the Swedish driver, is only 8/10 behind Wunsch in second position in these first couple of runs. Here comes Marcus Crawford, of course, the perennial underdog of VMS Pro, always sort of sneaking his way into the top 10, top 9 when people least expect it there. He's certainly not got the fastest in terms of raw pace, but he's such a likable character, Marcus Crawford. You can't help when you see him out there but root for him to at least get to the end and get some more points for his championship challenge.
Yeah, and it looks like these drivers are trying to take advantage as much as possible of the wetness, the moisture close to the wall on that front straightaway, which indicates to me at least that the main line, the main racing line around this circuit is starting to dry out at least just a touch. Obviously, still plenty of spray off of the back of these GT3 cars, but that is definitely indicative that we could see the pace pick up quite significantly as this session progresses, and this is going to be especially interesting for our much faster GTP or LMH cars at the very front of the field, the very edge of pace. They rely a lot on downforce more so than mechanical grip, but that of course also throws quite a lot of spray off the back of those cars, so we'll see how much the LMGT3s are able to quite cordially clear off the circuit for our faster class. As we look at Kieran Prendergast setting another purple sector, this time the second sector, 2/10, almost 2.5 tenths up on the fastest time of 155.916, currently held by last week's winner.
Yeah, Prendergast, of course, got one pole to his name for the sprint race at Interlagos so far this season, and that was the race that sort of that was the qualifying session that cost him for the following round at Sebring, because of course he then went one lap extra after the checkered flag came out. But oh, fantastic last two sectors there, nearly 3/10 quicker than anybody else on the run through Ascari and through the Alboreto Parabolica, 155.4 ahead of Seb Wunsch there. And Seb Wunsch will be looking at that and thinking, oh, I want to take 2 poles in a row. I'm going to have to really take a few more risks out here. As here is Valtteri Manninen then. Only 10 GD3s, I think, participating tonight then. So Manninen has got a good chance of getting into the top 6. And indeed, that's exactly what he does. 156.6 for the Finn there ahead of Marcus Crawford. Zach Vermaak, this is going to be his first representative time that he is just embarking on now, so I think he's yet to really get a full lap or at least a clean lap within track limits on the board so far. Same for Callum Cripps and Luca Fingard, but Zach Vermaak, who of course did the first endurance round at Spa and then finished the lap down on almost a lap down on that occasion in the end, and then has had to miss the next couple of races. So great to see the South African making his return then to VMS Pro and Le Mans Ultimate. It's Seb Wunsch, just hanging the rear of that Ferrari through Ascari. And is it me, Braden, or does the Ferrari just look a little bit less planted in these wet conditions through those high-speed chicanes than the McLaren does?
Yeah, the McLaren definitely seems to have the better grip, especially in those higher speed corners where downforce really is important to hold those cars down into the track. The mechanical grip certainly at a premium in these wet conditions, but you can just maybe see from some of our cameras just a little bit of sunlight peeking through the clouds. Of course, the lot of movement up in the sky, across the sky, so we expect a lot of the conditions to be variable in every sense of the word. We look now at Fabien Ballet trying to make another lap. So currently scored in the third position. That's McLaren, Ferrari, McLaren, McLaren, McLaren. So that also lends credence to our point that those McLarens really do seem stable in the wet.
Yeah, and in terms of the championships, everybody on track on wet tires at the moment. Then, so nobody's going to risk it on dries so far. I thought Callum Cripps might be doing that, which is why he hadn't set lap time. But no, he is playing it safe, much like everyone else. As Fabien Ballet actually goes fastest in the first sector, so the track is improving all the time. This is going to turn into Braden a case of last driver over the line could potentially be the one that sets pole position in terms of when the checker flag comes out, but. In terms of that overall title race, it's really Prendergast versus Vunch. All the other title contenders, the likes of Kamau, now we know is quit. Arda Urchan, I think, said in advance he would have to miss this round. So really both of the GT3, all three of the GT3 title races, for the overall honours, it's between Prendergast and Vunch, I think, pretty much exclusively, with all due respect to the rest of the field, as Fabien Ballet doesn't have a great middle sector here, but Seb Vunch also not improving in the first sector either. So, yeah, this is a case of Prendergast now, purple in the first sector himself. He could potentially be stretching his legs here. And could we finally see the golden opportunity that Prendergast has been waiting for the first 4 rounds of this season, having to be second best to 4 different drivers? Could he now finally be the one to take the spotlight? Oh, as he dips a wheel in the gravel. So even though the McLaren looks very well set up, Kim Prendergast is still pushing the absolute limits there. So no sign of complacency from the British driver whatsoever there, Brady.
Yeah, and I think we're starting to see this track dry out just a little bit, but regardless of the weather conditions, I think the real key here for these drivers, and this is going to be our biggest key to the race, is just that very first corner. When you get those cars all bunched up heading into turn 1, and especially add in some rain coming down on the windshield of Valtteri Männinen in the Corvette, add the rain into that equation, and it's very easy for your race to be over as soon as it has begun. So these drivers are going to want to be especially careful heading into that first chicane on the first lap, as everybody's all grouped together. And I think the LMGT3s will actually have a little bit of an advantage in that, right, with there only being 10 or so competing this weekend. So that is going to certainly help. There's strength in numbers in the draft, but certainly that's something that's a little bit disadvantageous when you're trying to survive the first corner of a race.
Oh, there we go. So some more laps then on the board. Callum Cripps is now in 7th position. Zach Vermack, surprisingly, starting to really excel in these conditions compared to where we normally expect him to be. He is in 4th at the moment, ahead of Michel Rodriguez, and only just under half a second off of Prendergast's current pole time. So really only 3 other drivers within Prendergast sort of half a second of his pace at the moment. That's Sebastian Wunsch, this man, Fabien Ballet, who's again fastest in the first sector and actually has a personal best in the middle sector here. So this could potentially be a front row that Fabien Ballet is looking at the moment. And of course, Zach Vermack then certainly impressive from the South African. That's the highest we've ever seen a BMW up on the grid so far this season, really. I think Luca Fingard in the top 6 is the only other one that comes to mind then. So Ballet towards the line. What can the German do? It's pole position. Just under a 10th ahead of Kieran Prendergast there. So not the fastest in the last 2 sectors, but that first sector, as you implied, Braden, doing all the hard work for him. And has Prendergast got enough time to go out there and beat that?
Yeah, that's what's going to be the big question here. Is Prendergast going to have to reside in second position and just take what he can get? But we saw the likes of Zach Vermack and Luca Thingard, especially at the beginning of the race in Sebring, performing rather respectably. Of course, one or the other, can't quite remember which, ended up running into trouble midway through that race. So the BMWs especially, I expect to have some pretty respectable grip and pace here in the wet conditions. The question is going to be if they're going to be able to hold on to that pace as the track dries out, or indeed if the track is going to get wetter throughout the race. We see Marcus Crawford, he's almost a second off of the fastest time in the first sector, but still his best of the session. He'll go 1.6 seconds down in the second sector, and I think he may end up having to abort this lap. You can see him struggling a little bit for grip through the chicane there, but able to keep it on track. Certainly better than Kieran Prendergast did when setting that pole pace that he had before it was, of course, eclipsed by Fabien Ballet a few moments ago. So we'll follow Marcus Crawford through Parabolica, the last set of corners here. He's currently scored last in that 10th position. We'll see if he's able to improve it all on that pace in the very lovely liveried BMW M Sport colors, and it looks like he's just going to pull to the right-hand side and come into the pits there, so not going to take that lap there, just going to bring it on into the pits down to 60 kilometers rather per hour, and he will surrender that time for the session, and I think that will be our last car out on track before we start to see our hypercars come out on track.
Well, so much for last man over the line might be the fastest. So Marcus Crawford, unfortunately, not quite able to live up to that immediately wrong prophecy, as Murray Walker would used to say of his own commentary. But anyway, GT3 grid order, it will be Fabien Ballet, I think, on pole position from Kieran Prendergast. So the Prendergast curse almost continues there with Fabien Ballet. This time it's his turn to jump in, but Prendergast will be able to get his own back come the race. Sebastian Wunsch lines up third ahead of Zach Vermaak, best ever qualifying for him. Michelle Rodriguez fifth. Mitchell is going to be sixth with Callum Cripps in seventh. Manninen eighth. Fingard ninth. And Marcus Crawford bring up the rear of our 10-car GT3 field. But I'm going to quickly go down for dinner then, while Braden, you can take us through the hypercar field. As the track continues to dry out, is anybody going to risk it on the dry tyres? We'll have to wait and see.
And we've just seen some contact on the pit lane between, I'm not sure which of the Cadillacs that is, but into the back of Mitchie Hoyer. Hopefully no damage done there for the number 15 BMW, but we'll have to keep a very close eye on that. And we talked a little bit about some of our contenders dropping out in the LMGT3 class. No such luck in the hypercar class. These guys are very much on top of each other. The likes of Davin Moravcik in the Lamborghini, and of course the BMW brothers, Mitchie Hoyer and Jerne Simoncic, have been nothing short of fantastic to watch. And you can see unleashing now the power of these hypercars, and they're led off the line by the number 3 gold-colored Cadillac. Just behind is Davin Moravcik in the number 19, and Marco De Buono in the lone Ferrari in the hypercar class. So Aurelien Bru is going to lead us off here. He was the 8th of our GTPs to join the session. He is followed not too far behind by the Lamborghini, who's going to be wanting, I assume, to get a slipstream here, but they're going to be trying to warm up the tires as best they can. You can see the spray coming off of the back of those cars. These guys much more grouped up than we saw our LMGT3s be in their session, so we'll see how the driving is a little bit different here. And Moravcik looks like he may even try to tuck up behind Bru and try to get a slipstream down the straightaway. I'm not sure if he'll go for the pass, but that is yet to be seen. A little bit further down the pack are our BMW contenders, who we've talked about several times already. But I think we may see some great speed from the Cadillacs this week. The V8 flat plane crank V8 from the American manufacturer is certainly going to be singing down the straightaways here at the Temple of Speed, and that is going to be music to the ears of the virtual commentators and those following along on the broadcast. So certainly keep an ear out for that, as the leader at the front now is Aurelien Bru. He's going to keep Moravcik in the mirror. Moravcik almost looking like he was trying to make a move to the inside there, and you can see the blue sidewalled Michelin tires indicating that they are out on wets, and you can still see drops of rain coming down on the windshield. We ride on board with the Cadillac V-Series R. Coming across the line now to start a lap, all the way up into 7th gear, the 200, 150, 100 marker on the left-hand side. They're going to hit on the brakes real hard, try to whoa up that Cadillac all the way down to 60 kilometers an hour, and now just trying to fight for grip as much as possible. No driver aids in these cars to allow them to just flat out sing on the right loud pedal. All the way up to 7th gear, and now wowing it back down once again, all the way down to just almost 80 or so kilometers an hour through the second chicane. Going to try to utilize the grip. You can see the rain coming down pretty hard right now. It looked like it was starting to dry out a little bit with the LMGT3s, but now we find no such luck for the Hypercars. The Hypercars are going to have to fight through the rain, but Aurelien Barou going to have the best of the vision for these drivers. I'm sure it's not quite as good of sight for Marokchek, not too far behind. Probably going to want to back off even just a little bit. Now to the left, back to the right. Going to try to utilize as much of that aerodynamic speed, that aerodynamic grip that you can't see on the cars, but always seems to be a big topic of conversations no matter what series you're referring to. Fastest first two sectors for Barou, so we'll see if those obviously get eclipsed, but it looks like the rain is coming down quite hard, so this may be a case where the first drivers out are going to be the fastest because they'll make use of the circuit before it gets all too wet. And it looks like, yeah, Marokchek has dropped off quite a lot to try to give some space. Really difficult to see out of that Lamborghini. Another of our Cadillacs now, this is Fabio Grigoletto, who had a fantastic comeback in last week's race, and he's in fact going to go to the top of the charts, but not for very long. Grigoletto loses out to Michi Hoyer, who goes fastest on the board at 142.171, and Jerne Simoncic just desperately begging those Michelin tires to grip up around the outside of Parabolica. He's followed not too far behind by the second of our Ferrari. So actually, I misspoke a little bit earlier. We do have two Ferraris out there, one in the yellow livery, that is Julien Guerin, the Frenchman in the AF Corsa Ferrari, number 83. He did not set a lap that last time, so presumably he unfortunately spent a little bit of time off the track. Daniele Farinelli sets a purple first sector, 160 thousandths of a second faster than that time set currently by Michi Hoyer. Going to try to just keep the grip going through Parabolica all the way, feeds it out to that runoff to the left-hand side, but looks like maybe able to hold it to the inside here. It almost looked for a moment there like Farinelli was going to go into the pit lane, but a 43.002, that is only going to be good enough there for 11th position. 0.8 of a second or so off of Michi Hoyer, and David Marokchek not having quite as much speed yet as we've seen. I think he kind of had to back off of the car ahead, who he was following rather closely on that first attempt. So David Marokchek in the Lamborghini Iron Lynx number 19 going to try and come across the line here with a purple first sector. Let's see how the third sector turns out. 142.048, that's going to put Marokchek just to the front of the field as soon as I've said that we maybe didn't see as much pace as we would expect from him. Fabio Grigoletto going to come across the line with a 142.302. So that may have been an improvement, but certainly not enough to get him to the top of the field, and Michi Hoyer responds rapidly to the pace of David Marokchek, puts himself back on the top of the charts. Let's see if Jerne Simoncic is able to compete. He's going to put himself in second position, so no purple sectors on that lap, but certainly some very respectful pace from the BMW. That's going to be enough for second position, and almost in a prophetic manner, we see our top three contenders for each of the three championships, Michi Hoyer, Jerne Simoncic, and David Marokchek, all at the very top of the field, and Marco De Buono and Fabio Grigoletto are going to round out our top five. Someone I haven't talked about yet, Gaetan Quidel in the number 3 Cadillac with very respectable pace up in the 6th position. So too for Jules Neal in the number 311 Cadillac. So a lot of Cadillacs as per usual out here, so we'll see just how good their pace can be, really making up the majority of that center of the field, that mid-pack that we see. So we're going to really get to see the balance for these drivers between trying to stay tucked up real close and trying to get a slipstream and work together, but also being blinded by the spray coming off of the back of the cars. And it looks like the rain maybe has let up just a little bit at the tail end of this session. No such spray coming off of the back of the 3 of Aurelien Barou as he comes along to set yet another lap, a pretty respectable pace, improved in both first 2 sectors, improves in the third, and that's going to be enough for 4th position. So he will momentarily eclipse David Marokchek until Marokchek goes across the line to take second back. So Daniele Farinelli, David Marokchek, and now Fabio Grigoletto have all set fastest laps. So the pace starting to pick up here with just under 3 minutes remaining in the session. Jerne Simoncic, just as we mentioned, it has gone purple in both of the first 2 sectors. He's just about to come across the line again. Is he going to be fast enough for pole? Yes, he is. 141.2. That is going to put Jerne Simoncic on the pole for the time being. not too far behind is another of the, I believe it was one of the Cadillacs not too far behind. So Daniele Farinelli really putting out some top grade pace. So too is Amos Larito, the Italian driver in the Cadillac number 3. He's currently scored in the 3rd position. So Tevin Moravcik actually separated a little bit from the 2 BMWs, who really are his championship rivals. But kudos to Daniele Farinelli, Fabio Grigoletto, and Amos Larito for having some really strong pace so far in this session. This is probably the best we've seen of the Cadillacs in qualifying, other than, of course, at Spa when it was Grigoletto who set the pace in qualifying, was able to take home the pole position. Of course, the home crowd is going to be very vehemently rooting for the likes of Marco De Buono in the number 50 Ferrari AF Corsa. He's gone and improved in the first sector, fell off a little bit in the second sector, 3/10 off from the fastest time. He's targeting a 141.2 still. That's held by Jernej Simoncic. Don't forget, a minute and a half remaining in the session. Marco De Buono actually going to let off the throttle and let Fabio Grigoletto go by, who's improved in each of the first 2 sectors. Really close on the pace, less than half a tenth off in each of the first 2 sectors. Is he going to be able to keep this pace up? He's going to come across the line in just a moment. He's 6th right now. Where's he going to go to? 3rd, as he sets a fastest last sector, but that's just immediately going to be eclipsed by Michi Hoyer, who goes back and really cements himself in that first position right now. We look now at Daniele Farinelli coming through the Lesmos and is going to go down this long straightaway. He's going to try to get as much speed as he can, as much slipstream as possible from the 2 cars ahead. I don't think he's quite close enough to really get much of anything, and you can see the track starting to dry out. Much less spray off the back of these cars. The spray of water has now been replaced with the sparks of the stop blocks on the underside of the under trays for these cars. A whole line of hypercars all here ahead of Daniele Farinelli, who's gone green in both first sectors. He's improved on his original pace. Is that going to be enough to make up any positions? Currently scored in 7th. This is a very competitive qualifying session for our hypercars, and now Clement Grigard has gone 2nd place. So now it is BMW, Cadillac, BMW. Everybody's still on wet tires, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. But Clement Grigard, where did he come from, putting himself in 2nd place? And similarly, Julian Guerin in the number 83 has put himself solidly in the 4th position. So that's one of our Ferraris. The home crowd going to be very excited to see that, with the number 83 up in 4th position. And that is going to really shake things up at the front of the field. We were expecting really to see a 1-2-3 with Hoyer, Simoncic, and Moravcik, and now they've been split up by a couple of others. And meanwhile, just as I say that, I look down and see that Jernej Simoncic has set purple sectors in each of the first 2. Is he going to be able to continue that pace? The clock strikes 0 a few moments ago, and he's going to be one of the last to come across the stripe. Let's see if Ed was correct in his prophecy. It wasn't correct for the LMGT3s, but let's see here. Is Jernej Simoncic going to be able to go fastest? He loses that purple first sector, maybe almost loses the car a little bit there. Yeah, that is Amos Larito who puts it on pole, but meanwhile, our pole sister has gone across, and Simoncic is going to set a 1:40.8.
Oh, somebody kicking up a lot of gravel ahead of Farinelli. Hello, by the way. The session is over, but everybody is still getting their final laps in, and nobody really looking like they might be a threat to Simoncic, though. So Simoncic and Larito is so close there. Amos Larito really paced himself incredibly well across that session as there's more yellow flags. Jules Neal leaps up to 3rd. And Grigard sets a purple final sector, but it's only good enough for 5th for the Frenchman there. So the man who looked a threat for the front row is going to have to start from the 3rd row instead, as Farinelli, oh, shame for him. He was setting purple sectors all over the map. Unfortunately, he's going to start 9th, which is still one of his better qualifyings of the season, to be fair, though.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting to see, because Moravcik did not qualify as well as I'm sure he would have liked to. He's going to be well and truly in the middle of that mid-pack, and it is going to be tough, especially heading through turn 1 to make up positions. He's going to have to make use of pit strategy, although with the rain and the lower pace, I'm not sure that these cars can't go the full distance. So just one load of fuel on board. We'll see if these drivers are able to make it all the way to the end with a little bit more off-throttle time because of the rain.
Yep, that's certainly going to be a factor, but the weather conditions we'll have to see once the grid forms up. But speaking of the grid, let's take a look at how they all line up from Hypercar through to GD3. So Jene Simoncic takes another pole position, but Amos Lorito, his best qualifying of the season, the Italian, will start alongside him. Jules Neal, the Frenchman, will start third with Michi Hoyer, the man joint leader of the championship, will start fourth. Clement Gagaud is in fifth ahead of Julian Gurin, best qualifying for Clement Gagaud of the season so far as well. On row 4, it's Davin Morokchek and Fabio Grigoletto. Plenty of work for those two to do to get where they belong in the top 4. Daniele Farinelli will start ninth with Aurelian Bru alongside him on row 5. Then on row 6, it's Marco De Bueno in the Ferrari with Bert Nops, the ever-reliable Dutchman, in 12th. Row 7, Kat Marianski is joined by Gaetan Quidel in 14th. Then on row 8, it's the first of our GD3s. Fabian Ballet on pole position from Kieran Prendergast. Can Prendergast do it today? Sebastian Wunsch is right behind on row 9 with Zach Vermaak in good company in 4th on the GD3 grid. Michelle Rodriguez is 5th with Regan Mitchell for company on row 10 in 6th in class. 7th will be Callum Cripps with Valtteri Manninen in the Corvette in 8th. Row 12 will be Luca Fingard and Marcus Crawford, the two BMWs making up the tail end of the order then. So big question marks now. Has it dried up, or will the rain reassert itself, Braden? That is the big question then as we look to the start of this race here. But for Amos Lorito, so nearly stealing pole position off of Simoncic, but Simoncic, the pole sister, did it again, didn't he? With a brilliant late effort there. Of course, on pole at Spa, and then again at Le Mans as well, and both races that he won. So the omens look good for Simoncic, but Amos Lorito, who's had quite a lot of bad luck this season, is looking very, very fired up. Look how fast those windscreen wipers are moving. It's almost like somebody's put them at 2x speed. Accelerated pace then, as the rain has intensified then. You can see it coming down. So we're not looking at a dry start. It's going to be very, very wet in the first phase of this race then.
Yeah, undoubtedly, and we've seen Simoncic really been the man of the hour when it comes to our endurance races. We'll see if he's able to break the curse. He's struggled a little bit more in our shorter format sprint races. That's why he's a little bit further down the order in those standings. But we'll see if he's able to make his way up. Yes, that's entirely fair. Yes, he did miss that race. So we weren't able to see him truly battle for the full season. These guys get one drop week at least. But again, huge kudos to Amos Lorito, Jules Neal, Clement Gagaud, and others who have not been quite as fast on outright pace, but have really shown up today in the wet.
Yeah, and of course, Amos Lorito, sort of the head of Tatum Esports, and of course, he was the one sort of when there was all those highlight videos we made of Grigoletto making his way back up the Hypercar order after his spin on the first lap at Le Mans. Although he was one of the ones cheering Fabio Grigoletto on with Farinelli and De Bueno, I think, are the other members of Tatum Esports then, the Italian organization then. But yeah, Jene Simoncic then is going to take the start here. It's going to be very, very damp behind, but Simoncic will have the clearest view into the first corner at the Rey de Filio chicane, and this is going to be very, very chaotic behind, I think. This is all about staying out of trouble, surviving this first stint then, because that is going to set up where you are for the entire first phase of the race then, as Simoncic gets the BMW into position. Green flag will be any moment now. Lorito will be desperate to try and get the jump then as we go to green flag. We're underway here for the sprint race at Monza. Round 5 begins. Look in the background. Jules Neal is getting the toe off of Simoncic. Hoyer as well, as they all go side by side with Lorito in the battle for second. Who is going to get to the first corner first? Lorito trying to go around the outside of Simoncic. Has he pulled that off? No, he's had to cut.
He's missed the corner.
Yeah, Simoncic goes through. Hoyer has got past Neil. Grigoletto is somehow in 4th now as well, but Lorito will have to let the BMW through. So Michi Hoyer is up to 2nd, crucially. So our two title protagonists, the two men tied on the points at the top of the table, are now 1 and 2. And that's a perfect start for Michi Hoyer as he defends again from Amos Lorito through the 2nd chicane.
Yeah, not so fast though. Lorito continuing to put pressure on. He is not giving up this position easily, and you could just see a spray of white and these cars just disappearing and reappearing. So the first of those cars is Jules Neal, who's made it up to the 4th position. So you're going to be hard to tell those apart. Number 311 Wheeling Cadillacs. That's Grigoletto behind Jules Neal, trying to take away the 4th position from him. So it's Cadillac 3-4-5. Not too far behind them is Davin Marokchek, as now Simicic is going to lead us. And fortunately, an uneventful start, at least for our GTPs, through turn 1. Nobody is any worse for wear. Larito, though, going to be disappointed to having lost the lead. And meanwhile, Kieran Prendergast has made his way past Fabien Ballet. So Prendergast continuing his rise and trying to make his finally break through the Prendergast curse of sorts and get that first win of the season. He's seeking a little bit of moisture to the right-hand side of the track, but you can still see plenty of spray coming off the back of that Inception McLaren.
To be fair, to be leading the main championship and pretty much within about 10-13 points off the lead in the sprint and endurance standings. That's not the worst of curses to have, as we see Guerin and Gagoud side by side, the Cadillac and the Ferrari. Can Julian Guerin go around the outside of Clement Gagoud through the red Fidio? Daniele Farinelli is tucking in behind both of them, trying to pick which one is best to follow through the Curva Grande there, but it's Clement Gagoud that holds on then. Remember, he started 5th, he's fallen to 8th then, and Guerin is giving him an incredibly hard time as Farinelli, trying to go all the way around the outside of the Ferrari, but thinks better of that one. It's so tricky to spot your braking point, especially when you're battling another car. Visibility is so tricky here, as we see Marokchek in the foreground, up the inside at Lesmo 1 on Grigoletto. That was a fantastic move there. Can he pull it off on exit into Lesmo 2? Grigoletto tries to reassert himself, but is not able to. The Italian now pushed down to 6th then, so that was exactly what Marokchek needed. He's starting to pick off the Cadillacs and get closer and closer to the podium and his 2 title rivals of Simicic and Hoyer.
Yeah, the second of the Italian brands, the Lamborghini represented here, and oh my goodness, just fighting desperately for grip through Lesmo 1 and into Lesmo 2. They're side by side, Callum Cripps and Michele Rodriguez side by side, and it looks like
double
the
move from Callum Cripps
is going to try to get through. Yeah, actually going to slot in between. So now Valtteri Maninen is the meat in the McLaren sandwich, going to try to go for a second pass down the straight here and into Ascari. Is he going to be able to make any sort of a move? He goes to the outside. Callum Cripps defends the inside, but misses the apex a touch there going through Ascari. So I imagine Manningen is going to have a good run coming off the corner. Callum Cripps desperately trying to hold on to that position.
There we go. And it's that Crawford in
into
trouble.
the back.
Marcus, what have you done? Just coming out of Ascari, he got a little bit too wide, and the rear tyres spun out of control, and into the wall he goes, as we see Captain Mariansky now trying to harass Bert Knops out of 13th position there. They go side by side as they approach the Curva Grande. It's Mariansky, the Polish driver, that's got the inside then. The 2 Porsches side by side, but it is the white Proton competition of Mariansky that takes advantage there. So very, very tight, but Bert Knops played very, very fair there, gave plenty of room. Mariansky can now focus on trying to catch the Cadillac number 3 that's ahead of him of, I believe that's Gaëtan Quidel now.
Yeah, and we look now off the front of the Cadillac of Jules Neal, just behind the fellow Cadillac of Amos Larito, who has had such a strong start today. But Jules Neal trying to make his way onto the podium positions. He's going to fake to the left, go to the right, but Amos Larito going to have the preferred line going into Ascari. He just nails that apex. Jules Neal trying maybe a bit of a crossover, and they're going to go still line astern coming out of the chicane. But now Jules Neal going to try to go to the left-hand side. Looks like he's got the overlap and a bit of a run here, so just to the quarter panel of Amos Larito, but he's not going to be in the position he wants to be going through Parabolica. Jules Neal and Amos Larito side by side, Cadillac on Cadillac. The gold Cadillac to the inside is going to get the better of him and maintain the position all the way down the straightaway, but turn 1 is going to be the biggest opportunity here for Jules Neal to try to take that position away.
Yeah, so Jules Neal, of course, the teenager driver for G-League Esports. Can the Frenchman put one over on Amos Larito? So experienced in sim racing, as the head driver coach for Lamborghini Esports. Jules Neal sticks his nose in there, and he's going to muscle his way through at the Red Filio. There was just enough space there left by Amos Lorito, and Jules Neal put the Cadillac right into it, but the move's not done yet. Amos Lorito refuses to yield through the Curva Grande. Side by side they go, bumper to bumper. This is wheel-to-wheel stuff in the pouring rain, but it's Neal that's got the inside for the Della Roggia chicane. Can he brake late enough to complete the move and stay within the track limits? Yes, he can, but all this battling is allowing David Rockcheck to coast up to the back of both of them, despite the huge amount of spray being thrown up by the two Cadillacs in front of him. So Lorito now loses the podium to the teenager Jules Neal, who's now in the top three for the first time this season, but David Rockcheck is going to be keen to pick both of them off in quick succession. So Neal needs to escape up the road if he wants to have any chance of finishing where he is at the moment.
Yeah, don't look now, but 4 seconds the gap now between Simicic and Hoyer and Jules Neal, Amos Lorito, and Devin Marachek, who we're looking at here. So the BMW guys have just run away with this thing. They're trying to get as much distance as they possibly can before they get through the first round of GT3 traffic. They are certainly going to want as much of an advantage as they possibly can going through there. You could see the 311 of Grigoletto just ducking out of line for a moment there, either trying to just see what the heck is going on or trying to get a little bit of moisture on those wet Michelin tires, trying to keep them cool. But Jules Neal certainly has the pace advantage over Amos Lorito, and Devin Marachek really doesn't seem to have the outright pace that we've seen from him in weeks past. He certainly is a contender for the top three, but I really don't think he has anything, at least right at the moment, for the likes of Simicic and Hoyer up front.
And I wonder, is that the case? As we see, is that one of the Cadillacs, number 3, just completely cutting across? It's Gagord, who has gotten the Red Filio completely wrong, and now Julian Guerin is going to close right back up to the back of him. But I was just going to say, if David Rockcheck, I wonder if he set that car up to maximize dry conditions, and maybe he is gambling on it drying out later on, whereas others have sort of committed to the wet setup, essentially, potentially. Although it could just be Lamborghini's, the natural characteristic of the Lamborghini means it's not the ideal car to have in the rain then. But here is our GT3 fight. So it's still Prendergast leading Fabian Ballard by 2.3 seconds then with Seb Vunch, who was a little bit slow at the start, 1.3 behind. This is Luca Fingard we're watching at the moment. Behind him is Michel Rodriguez. Ahead of him is Regan Mitchell then. And yeah, certainly Callum Cripps, we saw make that double move on Manninen and Mitchell earlier on, which was fantastic to see. He is in 5th and right behind Zach Vermaak. So that is a really, really interesting fight then, as the very, very inexperienced South African Zach Vermaak trying to hold the British driver, Callum Cripps, driver for Brabham Esports, at bay then. And in these conditions, we're really actually seeing a lot of our rookies, our less experienced younger drivers, coming to the fore and showing brilliant car control. But can Callum Cripps get through then? He's going to go side by side into the Della Roggia.
Oh, contacts!
Vermaak around. Zach Vermaak just survives that one there, but Callum Cripps was not shy about showing his nose from with just enough of half a chance of getting through there. He was going to go for that one, and Zach Vermaak is going to be much keener to close the door next time around, I think.
Yeah, and I think Zach Vermaak certainly going to be glad that he didn't end up chewed up and spit out in the gravel that time around, and Callum Cripps almost equally so, because I'm sure the stores would have had something to say about that contact. Zach Vermaak just closing the door late, heading into the chicane as we look now at our hypercar battle. This is Julian Guerin trying to hold off the fellow Frenchman, Clement Grigod, in the number 3 Cadillac. They're now just about side by side, not able to get the advantage at all through the Ascari chicane. Or excuse me, that is not Ascari, that is
Della Roggia.
Where are they at? They're Della Roggia, yep. So they're now heading into the Lesmos, and a little bit further up the field, Jules Neal continuing to try to hold off Amos Lorito. Lorito really with some respectable pace, and you got to imagine if you're in that third in line in that train and you're Devin Marachek, you're got to be just desperate for night vision goggles to try to see through the spray ahead. Can't imagine how difficult it must be to see
maybe
for these cars
equipment
as the rain continues to fall down. Yeah, maybe some scuba gear. Certainly going to be glad that they are not in the open top single-seater cars here. Going to be glad to have some windshield wipers at least on the front of the cars, heading round to Parabolica for yet another time. But that gap continues to grow between Jules Neal and Michi Hoyer, and so too from Michi Hoyer to Jerne Simicic. So Simoncic, since we last looked, or since I last looked, has put another second or so on Michi Hoyer, and he continues to pull out here around the Temple of Speed. He is very well and truly out, and Lorito's got a good run heading into turn 1.
Yep, Lorito then pulls to the inside then for the Redifilio. Jules Neal is stranded on the outside. There's some chaos going in ahead.
Hoyer's off.
I think it's Hoyer in trouble then. He's lost quite a bit of time, having cut the first chicane. Oh, and Lorito's almost squeezed into the gravel by Jules Neal there. Neal is not giving any presence out on track today, and this is music to the eyes and ears of Davin Rockcheck as they go round the outside of Crawford. I think Michi Hoyer had some issue trying to lap Marcus Crawford. We saw that big crash earlier on, but this means 3rd, 4th, and 5th in Hypercar are all bunched together, and Grigoletto is actually being held up now by Crawford as well. That's not ideal for the Italian then, as we see Zach Vermack. Oh, finally up the inside through Ascari comes Callum Cripps there. So the door opened wide, and Callum Cripps, the second time of asking, is able to get through into 4th position. This has been a great race from where Callum Cripps qualified, isn't it? As we now look at Neil, who has got, he's throwing up as much spray as he can because he's got his mirrors absolutely full of Lorito and Rockcheck, and is not in the most enviable position, is he? Because he's going to be under so much pressure, the own driver, from two very, very experienced titans of sim racing in all sorts of R Factor 2 and Le Mans Ultimate Championships. Then Rockcheck now looks at Lorito, who's about to pull to the inside into the Parabolica. This is bold from Amos Lorito. He goes side by side. He's got the inside here. Can he get the exit, though, as Jules Neal tries to, as the ring of death, to try and survive this assault? Then it's going to be side by side down the start finish straight. And who does Rockcheck pick to get the toe from? Who does he follow? He's going to stick to the inside with Lorito. That's probably the smart call. Lorito should have the advantage in, unless Neal can break later than late, and surely he's not able to. Rockcheck tries to follow through. It's very, very tight through this chicane there. They bump and bang. Neal desperately trying not to take Rockcheck out, but the Polish driver gets through into 4th position as Lorito is back on the podium.
Yeah, and don't look now, but there's quite a bit of GT traffic just ahead of this battle. That is going to spice things up significantly as we see Jules Neal lose 2 positions in 1 set of corners, but still no worse for wear for any of these cars. Some clean, tight racing amongst them. That's what we love to see. No wrecking each other, even in the rain. And Rockcheck's now under pressure from Jules Neal, who doesn't want to lay over. He's continuing to try to put pressure on and get back up onto those podium positions. You can see maybe the Lamborghini seems to be struggling a little bit in a straight line compared to the Cadillacs. Of course, that V8 engine, hard to argue with. And now, even though there's a huge gap to Michi Hoyer, about 4 seconds of a gap, in fact, these guys are now absolutely inundated with spray up ahead from the GT3 traffic. It's going to make it that much harder to see who you're trying to lap and to do so successfully and cleanly.
Oh, there's a lot of chaos going on behind, actually, in the battle for 9th. There's, round goes Jules Neal. Jules Neal has dropped it, I think, while trying to lap some of the GT3 traffic. And careful. Oh, he nearly got hit, collected by Burton Ops there. The steering does not look good on that 311 Cadillac. So Jules Neal, who was running in the podium for so long, was in 5th when he suddenly spun on the exit of Ascari there. Now Rockcheck senses here is the moment as he goes, squeezes in between the Cadillac and the Corvette towards the Redifilio. Then he's going to try and go around the outside of Amos Lorito. Lorito about to lose the rear end, just about saves that one, but Rockcheck is through into 3rd position. He's had to fight his way through in the pouring rain. And now he's finally in the top 3, albeit with a 5.7 gap to Michi Hoyer ahead of him, as we see more yellow flags on track. It's absolute chaos as our 3 yellow Cadillacs all together. It's Brew and Quidel fighting away over 9th position then, with Gagord just ahead of them. So all 3 of them falling into the clutches of Kakpa Mariansky. Then you see emerging from the spray, and there's a McLaren that's being under attack as well in the foreground too. Is that Kieran Prendergast, who's now suddenly fighting with Luca Finca? So I think Prendergast
must have made a mistake, yeah.
I think he might have been hit by Jules Neal, you know. That might have been what we saw there. So that's why Fabian Ballet's back in the GD3 lead. So the Prendergast curse of just bad luck continuing. A Hypercar in the gravel at Lesmo 1. It looks like Neal and Gurin are into the pits. Is the rain getting worse?
Either the rain is getting worse, but the unquestionably the visibility is getting worse as we see one of the number 3 Cadillacs
front
just
left
absolutely
wheel.
stuck, no wheel. So he's going to have to retire that car. That's going to go ahead and reset. Meanwhile, the 83 is in alongside the Cadillac of Jules Neal. So we've now started to see the attrition start to come in. And yeah, I think you're right. I think the rain has gotten at least just a little bit worse. But Amos Larito now going to try to track back down David Moravcik in the Lamborghini in almost prophetic fashion. It's now Simincic, Hoyer, Moravcik, 1, 2, 3, our 3 primary members of the battle for the championship, and you can see them going past, I believe, Sebastian Wunsch there. So this is now getting into the lead battle for LMGT3. So just ahead should be Fabien Ballet, and we see now the first DNF. It's Clement Grigard in the number 3 who will retire that car. Gaetan Quidel is able to continue going, but the attrition has just started to strike now our drivers around here in the rain.
Oh, have we lost Fabien Ballet from the race as well? We're struggling to pick him up on the broadcast, and that potentially has put Sebastian Wunsch then almost by default into the lead. So I think Fabien Ballet got disconnected there while leading the class. That's so unlucky, and that's our second leader in the GT3 class in this race to hit trouble then. So the order in GT3 is now Wunsch, who is 6.8 seconds ahead of Callum Cripps then. So Cripps has been chewing his way through the order, and now some attrition has allowed him to get the highest we've ever seen him in the order. Zach Vermaak is still on the podium in third, with Valtteri Mannin in the Corvette just 2 seconds behind him. Kieran Prendergast is now up to 5th then, back ahead of Luca Vingard then. So Prendergast, despite some horrendous bad luck, we'll have to interview him afterwards to hear what happened while he was leading, because
I think we've lost Mitchell now. Mitchell's dropping down the order.
Yeah, certainly something has happened to Regan Mitchell as well, because Rodriguez has gotten through, as you say. But yeah, Crawford had that massive crash earlier, which is why he's 123 seconds down on the rest of the field then. But yeah, certainly with all the chaos, if I were Marcus Crawford, then no reason to give up now, because there could still potentially be a shot at 8th, 7th, or even as high as 6th then, depending on how many people can even get to the end of this one while keeping the car in one piece, because it's certainly not guaranteed. With all the spray, visibility is very much at a premium here, and with the Hypercars coming through, it looks like it's not been as clean as either side of the Hypercar GT3 divide would have hoped then. So our 2 leaders, Simincic and Seb Wunsch then. It's almost a rerun of a week ago at Le Mans, isn't it? But Callum Cripps then and Zach Vermaak, certainly surprising to see them on the podium. They'll be hoping to stay there, but Prendergast, the fight back is going to continue. Next target, Valtteri Mannin, about 1.5 seconds up the road.
And meanwhile, as all this chaos is going on, I'm sure Jurnej Simincic could probably be playing the radio in that BMW, or perhaps
Hoyer's been closing in.
Hoyer has closed in a little bit, but that is, of course, after a mistake by Hoyer while lapping traffic. Hoyer has been able to bring up the pace. You have to at least consider that Jurnej Simincic could just be controlling his pace, but it's now 5.6 seconds back to David Moravcik, who is well off the pace of these 2 BMWs. They are truly dominant here today. Amos Larito continuing to hold on to the 4th position. Fabio Grigoletto in 5th, Daniele Farinelli in 6th. So that is Cadillac 4th, 5th, and 6th. Marco De Buono also running respectably in the 7th position. We saw at least Julian Guerin in the pit lane. I don't think he has retired that car yet, but now down at the bottom of the order in terms of our Hypercars, who have indeed continued on. So back out on track is Julian Guerin in the yellow AF Corsa Ferrari number 83, and trying now to put pressure on the Proton Competition Porsche ahead. And meanwhile, Mannin is going to have to try to hold off Kieran Prendergast, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to do so for very long, because that Inception McLaren obviously has some great pace. We'll have to see if there was any damage done by whatever had happened that ended up getting him all the way down the order from the lead, and is going to be able to have the inside line, the preferred lane going into Parabolica. Mannin, I think, just rightfully backs out there and gives up the position, going to have to then turn his attention to the next car behind, who I believe is one of the BMWs. I think that's Zach Vermaak, who's a little bit further back, and we see a pit stop now from Marco De Buono, so potentially some strategy being played here by the Ferraris. I initially had thought that maybe there was some trouble there for the first of the Ferraris, but if both have come in, potentially they recognize that they won't make it to the very end of this race on one stop, and they're deciding, well, let's just get out of the chaos, get some
Could be that.
some warm
or
rubber
he's
onto
also
the
got
car.
a penalty. Look, he's got a speed penalty for speeding in the pit lane there. So that is catastrophic for Marco De Buono. I think what happened there is that they're worried that the rain intensifying, that they're just running out of tires before we even get to halfway distance in the race. And they're thinking, look, we just skate off track, we lose everything here. So Marco De Buono, while trying to get more tires on playing it safe in the overall sort of scheme of things, has actually lost out because he's given himself a penalty by not putting the pit lane speed limiter on in time, or letting go of it too early on exit alternatively. But yeah, look at this. Hoyer now within 1.3 seconds of Simoncic. And Simoncic at Le Mans, we found out afterwards when I watched the stream essentially that he didn't actually change tyres at all throughout that race. He didn't just do a triple stint, he did like a quadruple, quintuple stint. Whereas Michi Hoyer behind was changing tyres at certain points, which is why towards the end, Hoyer got within 2 seconds, exactly 2 seconds actually, as they crossed the finish line, was the gap. But of course, Hoyer had left the charge a little bit too late, had to overtake too many cars, make up too much ground to get to that stage as well. But he really showed what could have been. And now we see almost a kind of another chance here. We see Aurelian Brew being overtaken by Mariansky as the two duel away over what's now 7th position with that pit stop for De Buono. And he's not going to come back there anytime soon with his penalty. So they've got that 7th position to themselves at Brew and Mariansky as Brew pulls out 2 seconds. So I think Mariansky has lost a bit of time there. But yeah, as we see yellow flags out on track, Michi Hoyer, he's going to fancy his chances with the championship up for grabs. He's not going to take it easy on Yerne this time.
No, not at all. And now 22 minutes elapsed, 38 or so remaining. Sebastian Wunsch continues to lead Callum Cripps. The gap opening up a little bit. 7 seconds or so is currently the gap between those two drivers. And if you're Kieran Prendergast, you're certainly going to be wishing this race was maybe a little bit longer so you'd have even more time to try to make it up and get back to the front of the field. But with the pace of Sebastian Wunsch, I think it's going to be a tall order to ask for that. But the 59 of Callum Cripps continuing to put down perfectly respectable pace. We look now back at Luca Thingard and Michel Rodriguez not too far behind. Just ahead of them is Zach Vermack, I believe. Yeah, no, Kieran Prendergast, excuse me. So Valtteri Männinen, Thingard, and then Rodriguez down 18th, 19th, and 20th, respectively, in the overall order. But Valtteri Männinen still putting a very respectable pace down here ahead of Luca Thingard in the BMW. So now we're seeing how the weather and the attrition is allowing these brands that we've seen struggle mightily throughout the season now having much more respectable comparative pace and certainly track position this weekend.
Yeah, and certainly the big one to watch is going to be Prendergast, 1.7 seconds now behind Zach Vermack then. But there's a 10-second gap between Vermack and Callum Cripps. Cripps, I think, is the driver that's always in the voice calls with when I watch back Kieran Prendergast stream. So it'll be interesting to hear if Callum Cripps decides to go for his own chances of victory, because he's been keeping Wunsch sort of at arm's length for sort of within about 7 seconds or so. Wunsch hasn't completely escaped. There's bit of a slow apex there for Luca Thingard, and Michel Rodriguez gets very, very close then as they exit the Parabolica. But they're all sort of just being tucked up behind Valtteri Männinen. We've not seen a Corvette finish higher than 5th. That was Elise Buzita and the last wet race we had in VMS Pro at Sebring, of course. So certainly when attrition is the order of the day, it was one of the Corvettes that tends to come to the fore, and Valtteri Männinen enjoying life in the top 5 at the moment, but he's going to have to fight to keep Thingard and Rodriguez at bay then. As we look now, here's Michi Hoyer. Lap times relative to Simoncic, it's still even Stevens, isn't it? Still 1.3 between the pairs. Simoncic not quite able to escape as some might have expected him to. So Michi Hoyer, it seems as that. I was going to say a bit more confident. Yeah, I mean, that's one way to try and get a little bit closer, at least temporarily, to Yerne. But now Davin Roche is going to see this, and he's been slowly catching them, hasn't he? He was about 5 seconds behind, now only 3 seconds behind Michi Hoyer there. So a crucial mistake from Michi Hoyer is allowing the Lamborghini to just start to get their hopes up of potentially getting another spot on the podium, and Simic isn't that far ahead either. Simic has not had a good Della Roggia chicane either, because he's now back within under 2 seconds, the gap between Hoyer and Simic. So the Hypercars trading mistakes for the podium here, but these are our 3 title contenders then, so this is just absolutely knife-edge stuff, isn't it, Braden?
Yeah, this is a microcosm of the season overall, just trading opportunities, trading pace, and trading paint, for that matter, between these 3 drivers, and that's why these 3 have really been the class of the season, as we see now the class of the GT3 class all season. Kieran Prendergast trying to put some pressure on Zach Vermack, about half a second ahead, and I think this time around he's going to be able to take that position away, whether Zach likes it or not. The pace is simply better in that Inception McLaren as they come across to complete yet another lap. 34 or so minutes remaining now, so we're rapidly approaching halfway through this race, and Kieran Prendergast is going to be once again hoping that he can get this position, this overtake done as quickly as possible so that he can try to make a run for the podium position. So he now is going to get himself onto the podium, I'm sure of it, by the next couple of laps. But the question is he going to have enough pace to make up the 11 or so seconds between his battle right now with Zach Vermack and Callum Cripps, currently scored in second position. He's going to go around the outside at Curva Grande and put himself in fantastic position for the chicane now. Let's see, Zach Vermack is going to close the door. He did the exact same move on Callum Cripps not too long ago and very nearly got run over. Meanwhile, Morgan Bono, there's contact. Morgan Bono going around the outside, and there's going to be contact between the two of them. So very nearly tragedy there for the Ferrari, as the McLaren desperately trying to get track position on Zach Vermack in the BMW, and now he's got the run. He's going to go to the outside. Is he going to have enough pace to clear him by the time they get to Ascari?
Oh, you can tell Zach Vermack does really not want to give up this podium, even to Kieran Prendergast. Prendergast flashing his lights as if to say, do you know who I am? And Zach Vermack, I think, does now at the very least. But I'm amazed that Buono in the hypercar of the Ferrari didn't get taken off track when they went 3 wide there. That was so tight there, and Prendergast was sort of between a rock and a hard place, quite literally. But somehow he survives, and now he's back on the podium as he would have hoped there. So yeah, now the next focus has got to be on catching Cripps up the road. Cripps within 6.3 seconds of the class leader, Sebastian Wunsch. So Wunsch, he's not really escaping with half the race still to go. If I were Callum Cripps, I might fancy my chances of victory. And McLaren still looks like the better car to be in, despite the fact that the Ferrari has built up that lead in the first part of the race then, as we watch Marocek and Michi Hoyt trying to negotiate all of the GT3 traffic without tripping over it. Marocek still 2 seconds behind, but he's got a couple of cars to clear before he gets to the red. Filia is not going to quite clear Manninen, so that could hold him up then on
contact
exit
there. Little bit of contact there, rear end damage potentially for the 19. He's gotten rammed into from behind by the BMW. Hopefully no damage to that Lamborghini SC63 as it continues its charge to try to take away the second position from Michi Hoyer through Curva Grande. And it looks like Zach Vermack is now even trying to block the GTP traffic. A little bit of side-by-side contact there. Zach Vermack absolutely relentless in his defense right now, and he doesn't even care which class you're in. He does not want you to pass. He's harder to pass than a kidney stone right now.
I think also with the spray, I think Vermack may have just not seen the bright green, admittedly very, very brightly coloured Lamborghini in time there going into Della Roggia. But the upshot of all this is that Simoncic has built up another second in his lead over Michi Hoyer then, and it's a similar gap to David Marocek then. So the top 3 starting to spread out ever so slightly. Grigoletto has kept Laredo incredibly honest. The 2 Tatum Esports headliners there in 4th and 5th. We know so supportive of each other, but it's every man for himself in these conditions. It's a fight for survival then, as we cut back to Fingard, having hit the back of Marocek. Now just starting to worry about Michel Rodriguez, who's been following him pretty much the entire race so far, as they have been stuck behind Valtteri Manninen. And is that Zach Vermack being caught by them? Because Vermack has been so stubborn not to let the Hypercars through that he's actually lost time overall in the race. I wonder if he had just let Prendergast through, he might have had a bit of a bigger gap to this gaggle of cars behind him then. But now Manninen He can't think about attacking because he's got to defend from Fingard, who is right in the toe then as they let Grigoletto go through. And Fingard now pulls to the inside for the Red Ophelio. Manninen's going to be stranded on the outside. There's nowhere for him to go, surely. He can't break late enough, and Zach Vermaak is almost holding both of them up there, and that allows Manninen to, bully his way, pushes Fingard onto the gravel, and that's going to hurt Fingard's exit. Round the outside goes Daniele Farinelli. Looks like Rodriguez a little bit too far back to take advantage. So Valtteri Manninen has to get his elbows out to hold on to that 5th position. And he really wants to have a go at Zach Vermaak for that 4th place here. But Fingard getting very, very eager to get through now.
Yeah, and despite only 10 LMGT3s in the race today, big time contact there. Looks like Manninen just did
Rodriguez
not get the exit he was hoping for, and Rodriguez now going to take advantage into Lesmo 1, but on the outside now is the BMW. Is he going to be able to hold off the McLaren behind? He was attacking. Now he desperately has to defend, and it looks like he's just going to maybe be able to hold on to that position. A loose moment for the McLaren, who will now lose a bunch of time, and don't look now, but here comes the traffic.
Zach Vermaak breathing a sigh of relief there because they're all starting to fight each other rather than him. As we see yellow flag, that's Gaetan Quidel, who had a spin at Lesmo 1. He's recovered now. Emerging from the spray comes Manninen, Fingard, Rodriguez, and now Rodriguez has actually been caught by Regan Mitchell as well. So Mitchell has actually had a strong recovery at this last phase of the race then, and now he's right in the hunt for 4th position once again. So great to see Regan Mitchell never say die out. He's through on Rodriguez then. Next target, the impassable Luca Fingard, who himself has found Valtteri Manninen a bit of a tough nut to crack then. But Zach Vermaak will be starting to get a bit worried because he knows Regan Mitchell has probably got the pace to clear all of these drivers if he can get through them.
Yeah, and all this chaos has given a bit of luck to Zach Vermaak, who was hoping for just a bit of reprieve. 2 seconds now, the gap between himself and Valtteri Manninen just behind. We see the Proton competition Porsche make its way through this battle, and you can see just Luca Fingard is just so much faster on exit. He seems to have much better grip than Valtteri Manninen in the Corvette ahead, but the Corvette just able to pull away on the straightaways and add into that mix now. The traffic coming through, a couple of hypercars trying to make their way through, and Michelle Rodriguez trying to get back past Regan Mitchell. So they are now side by side heading into the second chicane, and it looks like Rodriguez is going to take the spot. So Rodriguez now finds himself in that just +1 position. So Valtteri Manninen, in fact, in 5th in class over Luca Fingard, 19th overall for Team WRT BMW, but it looks like, at least for the moment, the rain has quenched that battle a small bit. We look off the back now of Fabio Grigoletto, who has lost a position to Amos Larito. So Larito, or in fact, has held on to that position. So Larito in 4th, Grigoletto in 5th, Farinelli in 6th, Orlane Brew in 7th. So the Cadillacs all kind of grouped together. The BMWs grouped together at the very front of the field, and the lone Lamborghini and Devin Marokchek has not been able to make up very much time on Michi Hoyer. Still 2 seconds or so the gap there, but Simoncic has opened up the gap to 5 seconds at the front of the field. So it is certainly going to be tough asking for either Michi Hoyer or Devin Marokchek to try to get past him with only 26 minutes remaining now.
I tell you, speaking of 5 seconds, look at the GT3 lead. Wunsch is actually being caught a bit by Callum Cripps, who's gone from 7 seconds behind to 5 seconds behind over the last 15 minutes. This was a penalty for Marcus Crawford at the back of the GT3. It's been one of those days for Paul Marcus, sadly. But I don't blame you for getting mixed up when we were looking. Asa Crawford, I think, have just exiting the pit, so he must have sped in the pit lane, much like we saw De Bono do earlier. But Amos Larito, I don't blame you for not realizing that Grigoletto was still behind, because there was so much spray from the back of Larito, and somewhere in that is Fabio Grigoletto, who you can tell stuck behind Amos Larito. He was just struggling under the brakes to get the car sort of slowed down in a straight line. But he's really, really getting close at this phase. He really fancies a go at 4th position in Hypercars. We see a yellow flag somewhere up ahead of them, and it's Gaetan Quidel again. He's gone off at Ascari. Is that on his own, or potentially trying to lap one of the GT3s there that he has come to grief? But Quidel has been spinning around like a spinning top at certain points of this race, sadly for him. But he is somehow still holding on to 10th position. Such is the chaos that he has had to deal with today then, as we've watched now on board with Grigoletto being given a face full of moisture from the back of Amos Lorito's car. He really, the thing is, as much as he wants another 4th position, remember he fought so hard to get all the way back up to 4th at Le Mans. Amos Lorito, his friend, maybe a little bit of a mentor in the Tatum Esports team. He doesn't really want to push him out of the way here. He wants to make a clean move, but that's easier said than done in these conditions.
Yeah, unquestionably. In 10 seconds, the gap now between them and Marokchek. They've been going at it so hard that Marokchek's kind of run away with it and has now turned his sights definitively towards those ahead of him, not having to defend at all, even though he was kind of stuck behind these two drivers earlier on. And it looks like a little bit of a rundown into the first Lesbo. He's going to back out of it wisely, not going to try to stick the nose in there on his Cadillac teammate. And you could just tell that even though the Cadillacs seem very self-assured down the straightaways, very high power from the V8s in the rear end of those cars, they seem quite nervous in the rear when they start to brake, especially for these chicanes, especially the first set of corners where they have to just go from absolute VMAX to VMin, in fact, and end up just the rear end trying to swap ends on those cars. We look now off the front of Michelle Rodriguez, who just has a face full of spray from a couple of LMGT3s ahead, and you almost have to wonder how it's possible for these drivers to even try to pay attention to what's going on behind them when you have a faster car coming, when you're still just desperately trying to focus and see what's going on out the windshield.
Rigoletto's through. He's up the inside then at the Parabolica there. Sorry to cut across you, Braden, but that was fantastic opportunism there. Lorito now tucks back into the slipstream himself. His fellow countrymen ahead of him. This is their home race, of course, for these two Italians. Lorito is positioning himself for attack up the inside, but decides to play the long game, cut back to the racing line. Oh, fully over the curb there. Lorito nearly went flying there just to avoid the back of Grigoletto, I think. But yeah, fantastic move from Fabio Grigoletto. We just saw the end of that, and that's him up into 4th place. So it's the same top 4 that we saw at Le Mans a week ago then, but they've certainly all had to fight to get into those positions. Meanwhile, Callum Cripps, 4.5 seconds now. He's taken another half second out of Sebastian Wunsch. The McLaren is the better car, Braden. I think Seb Wunsch is really, really fighting to just minimize the time lost because he knows that McLaren has got so much more confidence in these conditions here. And Callum Cripps, unexpectedly, knows there's a small chance he might be able to steal this win from Sebastian Wunsch. Prendergast is just that little bit too far back, 11 seconds in a rearview mirror to challenge then. So Callum Cripps, he desperately wants to be our 5th different winner from the 5 races we've had so far in GD3 this season. But it's quite the arse. Sebastian Wunsch, we saw how dominant he was at Le Mans. Even now, he doesn't have the best car like he did at Le Mans for this particular track. He is such a high-quality driver that he's not going to give this up without a considerable challenge from Callum Cripps.
Yeah, the Ferrari just seems much less self-assured, especially in the corners, compared to the McLaren. There's a reason why the McLaren was such a popular pick amongst our drivers from the very start of the season. We look back now at this continuing battle between Luca Thingard, Michelle Rodriguez, and Valtteri Maninen up ahead. They just haven't been able to get rid of each other. I'm sure Luca Thingard is going to go to sleep and see the taillights of the Corvette C8R when he goes to sleep tonight in his vision, in his dreams. But still going to have to defend from Michelle Rodriguez in the back, and again for the same reason that the McLaren at the front of Callum Cripps is able to eat into Seb Wunsch's lead. That McLaren just seems exceptionally well assured in the corners. A lot more mechanical grip, it would seem, from the British brand than from the German brand just ahead.
Yeah, and you see the windscreen wipers have stopped turning as, it's an interesting livery on the Porsche there that they just lap. But Davin Marokchek is now starting to close on Michi Hoyer. He was the second behind. He's cut another couple of attempts out of that lead here. And are we going into potentially in these last 20 minutes a big decision time between do you stick it out on the wets or do you potentially risk it for the final less than 10 minutes or so of the race on dry tires then. That could be a realistic possibility. It's Vermack, I think, has lost that 4 position because he's gone into the pit lane with 20 minutes to go. Has Zach Vermack seen that it stopped raining and decided, right, I'm going to take the gamble here? I think that's a really risky call then as he goes long in the pit box as well. Maybe he just was starting to run out of grip on those wet tyres. Then Manninen is off now at the Red Filio, and that potentially has allowed a load of cars for including Luca Vingard, of course. So, yeah, it's all kicking off now.
Yeah, and ironically, just as the rain has stopped, and you can see the spray has definitely gone down in intensity off the back of these cars. It's at exactly this point that it's kicking off again, and the drivers are starting to struggle once more. But look now, Michi Hoyer and Devin Moravcik are now right on top of each other. Look at this now. Michi Hoyer only half a second of gap between himself and Moravcik, and I think it's in the drive that this Lamborghini really is going to thrive with just 19 minutes remaining in the race. Is it enough time for him to challenge for the lead as Manninen is off? That's actually, is that Manninen or that's the other of the Corvettes?
There's no other Corvette. It must be Manninen because Elise Bizito isn't here today. So by process of elimination,
that question, doesn't it? Yes.
So there is Zach Vermack. Has he gambled it on the dry tires, or is he just running out of wets and has gone for a new set of wets? By the way, as we see. Looks like he is staying on another set of wets then, so that is probably the sensible choice. So Zach Vermack, rather than spinning off track like Manninen, he's decided, much like Marco De Buono, to play it safe. Potentially there might have been a few drivers risking it on the fuel as well that are deciding also to play it safe. From that point of view, is Michi Hoyer, you can see him starting to get defensive, starting to tighten up at the wheel of that BMW as they lap the 95 McLaren. I believe that's, it must be... Fabian Ballet. It's Ballet, I think, still going. He's Ballet reconnected, I think, and is a lap down. He was, of course, leading from pole position after the incident for Kieran Prendergast here. But this battle, of course, has big championship implications. Just look at the huge drift from Michi Hoyer. The rears are starting to struggle here, and who has conserved their tyres best? As the rain starts to die down, the wets are going to start to overheat here, and this is a really, really tense moment here for Michi Hoyer. Needs to keep his title hopes alive. Simicic has pulled an 8-second gap now on the both of them, but Davin Moravcik wants to relieve second position off of Michi Hoyer. He's had a fantastic recovery in this race, and Hoyer is really going to have his wits about him, because this is if Davin Moravcik, as we suspect, has set his car up more for the dry, then he's going to be so much faster in these final 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, and in the midst of this battling, Simicic has run off 9.5 seconds now, the gap, and growing rapidly between himself and Michi Hoyer, and then just a couple of tenths back to David Moravcik. Also, Fabio Grigoletto continues to hold that position over Amos Larito, so we saw that pass a few moments ago. He still holds that position, but 11.5 seconds between himself and Davin Moravcik ahead, so two distinct groups have formed in our hypercar, but really it's Simicic who's gone and run away completely with this thing. And these drivers, as the wets start to overheat, are going to be seeking moisture, especially on the straightaways, trying to keep those tires as cool as possible so that they don't lose grip in this most vital point of the race.
Yeah, meanwhile, Callum Cripps now just 2.5 seconds behind Sebastian Wunsch as well. Wunsch continuing to be caught little by little. There's a couple of sectors where the Ferrari is attempting to fight back, but the general trend is that Cripps just keeps getting closer and closer. Now there's Kieran Prendergast in the way of Michi Hoyer at the Red Filio, and Davin Moravcik knows he has to get through as quickly as possible. He gets the little embers of slipstream before ducking out at the last moment through Curva Grande, but that has allowed Michi Hoyer to just extend just a tenth or two then, so Moravcik not really close enough to do a risky move into the Della Roggia chicane here. But as the track continues to dry out, have Michi Hoyer just run out of tyres at this phase, because the pace of these two has really not been much of a match, as we see a bit of a slide on through Lesmo 1, and now Moravcik knows this could be his chance to pass Michi Hoyer for second then as they go onto the straight. They're going to go under the old circuit, the bridge that's just coming up now after this small left-hand kink. That's where the old Monza banking is. If you've ever seen the 1966 movie Grand Prix, that's where the finale of that film takes place, on the old circuit with the banking there, as Michi Hoyer or just fighting for control. He is squabbling with that car as much as he is with Davin Rotchek behind him at this point, isn't he?
Yeah, and meanwhile, while we're watching this battle for second and third in Hypercar, the battle for the lead in LMGT3 is fixing to spice up. And meanwhile, we see big off for Luca Thingard, and he's going to lose a bunch of time to Valtteri Mannanen, who he was in the midst of a battle with. But Callum Cripps, meanwhile, has closed up the gap to Seb Wunsch. So under 3 seconds the gap there as we see Bert Knox go around a fellow Porsche. So that's actually Ballet.
So he reconnected, and this is the skin the game has given him. Porsche 911. Oh, and look at this. In between the two, that's terrible for Rotchek because the McLaren is in the way. Is that Callum Cripps then, who's actually lost a little bit of time there to Seb Wunsch, who gets another second to his to aid his charge then. But yeah, you saw Callum Cripps so desperate not to lose time, and in the end he has anyway, and that's cost Davin Rotchek too, who was so desperate to get through there.
Yeah, this battle is heating up rapidly for second and third in Hypercar and first and second in LMGT3. And I think Seb Wunsch really made out there because he got past rather easily, at least relativity, to
Knops in the pit.
Callum Cripps behind. So Knops now finds himself in the pit lane. That Jota Porsche now is going to be looking for some fresh rubber, I imagine, as well as a top off on fuel with just 13 minutes remaining. You can see it go up on the jacks there for some fresh rubber. And now down off the jacks and onto the loud pedal. Going to try to make up a little bit of time here as the track continues to dry out. And you can see the spray is really the only moisture around the track now.
Yeah, and Gaetan Quidel, despite going around so many times, because he is kept with it, stuck out there, he's actually gotten back up to 9th then due to Bert Knops running out of tyres. As we see Simicic is in the pits, so Simicic is gambling on the dry. Surely that was the only reason why he'd be coming in at this phase.
Yeah, and not far behind him, Rotchek is also in the pit lane, so Michi Hoyer, the only one of the top 3 to continue on, and I have to imagine maybe a splash and dash for these cars. The strategy is going to be interesting. It looks like they've both gone up on the jacks, but I could absolutely be wrong, as now Simicic is going to release. So these drivers not able to make it all the way to the end on one tank of fuel. And you have to imagine someone like Marco De Buono is going to be absolutely kicking himself. Very nearly a spin there for Rotchek on the loud pedal, trying to get through. Now everybody pitting all at once for some... I'd have to imagine dry tires at this point, trying to get out into contact now. Callum Cripps hard contact with the stopped Cadillac ahead.
I think that was
Fabio Grigoletto now instead.
It was either
I have to imagine, yeah.
Brew or Laurito. I think it was Brew actually, because Laurito is still out there, isn't he? So Hoyer and Laurito now first and second, but are they going to... We saw how low Hoyer was on tires. Is he surely going to have to follow these guys in? Is Prendergast now being held up behind Aurelian Brew? So more bad luck for Kieran Prendergast as he gets a penalty on the pit exit there. And Kieran Prendergast just... What does he have to do to win in this championship? And all of a sudden, we talked about Kieran Prendergast looking so comfortable in the lead. At the moment, Seb Wunsch, he may have called this perfectly by staying out here. We don't know yet. But it could be that Callum Cripps is able to undercut him here. But this has really mixed up the order then in the final 10 minutes. Who's going to run out of tyres and who's going to speed through? As into the pits comes Michi Hoyer. Surely he knew. He saw which way the wind was blowing and knew he could not risk it out there. So that's surely going to hand the lead back to Simicic, because I think, in fact, they just had to pit for new wets. It's not because... and maybe fuel as well, like you say, Braden. So it's not because they think it's going to dry out in time. It's just because they haven't got the tread to get to the end without going off track.
Yeah, and they're desperately just begging for grip, but with how short that stop was, I have to imagine it was fuel only. So here's Jurnej Simicic coming around to take another lap completed. The question is going to be, where's he going to come out in relativity to Michi Hoyer, who had a completely clean lap coming through that time? I think they're going to meet each other now in the first chicane. Is Simicic going to go through? Yes, Simicic just blows past well into the lead, but there is still some lap traffic ahead in the form of the number 83 Ferrari. The Lamborghini has fallen well off of the two BMWs in that pit sequence after having a hard time.
I got
after
confused
having a
there.
really hard time. Yeah.
Saw a Cadillac ahead, and I thought it was Quidel, who, of course, has gotten a drive-through penalty for speeding in the pits, like so many have done. It is such a hard pit entry, actually. Here's, oh, look at the Rito, immediately trying to hang the rear out there, but Grigolotto is ahead. In fact, Grigolotto has undercut him and extended that gap then as we go into the final 10 minutes of the race. So the order, Simičić leading Hoyer by 5.5 seconds. So Hoyer actually did close in because he did have a shorter stop, had to take on less fuel, of course. Morocek is about 3.7 seconds behind. Then it's Grigolotto 12 seconds in arrears, but 2.9 ahead of Laurito. Farinelli, we've not talked about Daniele Farinelli much. He is 6th with Aurelian Bru 7th. Mariansky is 8th. Bert Knops is 9th. And Marco De Buono, incredibly, despite everything he's been through in this race, is a lap down, but still in the top 10. Here is the 59 McLaren we're looking at the moment of Callum Cripps, I believe. 2.3 seconds by Sebastian Wunsch. So Wunsch, despite pitting later, taking on a bit less fuel, he continues to be caught here, and I think this is the big story. Can Callum Cripps steal victory? Because that would help Kieran Prendergast so much with his drive-through penalty. He's fallen down to 6th then, 6 seconds behind Valtteri Manninen, and Michel Rodriguez, incredibly, is going to inherit the final spot on the podium. So it looks like it started drizzling again on track then. As you see, Callum Cripps actually trying to move to the left. Is he trying to cool the tires down potentially? That's a very odd decision into Ascari there.
Yeah, you have to imagine just trying to cool down the wet tires. They've put these new tires on just as the track was starting to dry out, but now maybe a bit of a drizzle coming back down at parts of the track. You can see the windshield wipers are back on the Richard Mille sponsored McLaren. So Callum Cripps continues to eat into that lead of Sebastian Wunsch just at 2 seconds. He can't seem to quite break past that threshold of 2 seconds, but we'll see as the rain starts to come down again if Sebastian Wunsch is going to be able to hold on, and hopefully in lieu of any sort of mistakes, this will be a heads-up race between the 59 and the 86.
Incredible to think before today, Callum Cripps had never finished on the podium in the GT3 class. So many different winners. Can Callum Cripps become the 5th in a row, or can Sebastian Wunsch hold on and be the first driver to win 2 races in a row in GT3? Meanwhile, Prendergast, you sense the wind has kind of gone out of his sails since that pit lane speeding penalty, because he isn't really catching Fingar quickly. He might still catch him before the end. He's pulling away a little bit from Luca Fingar behind, but Manninen is 7 seconds ahead then, so you can tell Prendergast maybe taking a couple of risks here to try and catch up, but yeah, you can just see, maybe, I think a lot of these drivers have just kept the same tyres on. It literally, as you said, splash and dash and added fuel on, so that was why we saw a bit of cooling needed for the tyres of Callum Cripps, but those tyres are still working better than those on the Ferrari, it must be said. So Seb Wunsch, he knows he cannot afford to make any mistakes here, because that's the difference between victory and defeat, because Callum Cripps is not going to be leaving anything on the table then. Meanwhile, up front, Rodriguez still within about 3 seconds of Michi Hoyer, but Simičić starting to extend the lead he had earlier back out again. Closest battle in Hypercar is Farinelli holding off Aurelian Bru for 6th, and Daniele Farinelli, who finished, I think, 7th or 8th at Spa, the endurance race there. He's never really finished in the top 10 since, so good to see him. He lost that a little bit in qualifying, didn't he? But so good to see him have a clean race and to comfortably be ahead of Aurelian Bru for the time being, holding him up very, very convincingly here. As we see yellow flags in the middle sector somewhere. Clears up quickly, so it doesn't look like oh, and it's Quidel. Quidel, that's big damage to that car as he comes through.
Yeah, that looks like suspension damage.
Oh, he's had a big crash then, so maybe just losing the rear and spinning off into the wall then.
Yeah, a little bit of crab walking there for the gold-colored number 3 Cadillac. We look now at the battle once again for the lead. Last lap time, it was a 9/100th of a second gap between Sebastian Wunsch and Callum Cripps in favor of Seb Wunsch. So he opens up that gap maybe just a little bit, 2.1 seconds, but those guys have been just on top of each other in pace, nothing between them as the very light rain, just enough hopefully to keep these tires cool for the remaining 5 minutes and 35 seconds here, as Marco De Buono going to be the next person to come through, and just a little bit of a moment there for Callum Cripps having to cut the end of the chicane, and hopefully that won't hinder his progress here trying to get up into the lead, but I think Seth Bunch is just unshakable, not making any sort of mistakes
Is
in
he
the
not?
race. It's
Oh, and it's
Ferrari, and now
Neil!
Jules Neal is off.
And
So
they're all
another big
going off
moment
at
for Jules Neal and
Parabolica.
Parabolica.
So he's done exactly what Quidel, I think, has done. Somehow gotten away with it for the most part. The yellow flag should clear soon, but yeah, I think there was a lapped car that we saw on board with Callum Cripps. Marcus Crawford now goes off on the exit of the red Ophelio, so Evie's tried to carry too much speed through the second part of the chicane, as we see, Zach Van Mack also doing a bit of gravel kissing as well. But the BMW is just really struggling to turn then as the rain has arrived and everybody's running out of wet tires because they didn't change at the pit stop essentially. So this is where those who maybe changed tires midway through the race to another set of wets might be laughing all the way to the bank then, because everyone on the road is in danger of falling off in front of them.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting last 4.5 minutes or so of racing here. Simoncic has established himself well at the front of the field, but Michi Hoyer is not too far ahead from Devin Moravcik. We'll see probably another 3 or 4 laps here around, as we see going through some lapped traffic, even in his own class now, is Yernej Simoncic, such as the pace that he has been able to have throughout the weekend. So Julian Guerin is going to go down a lap in the number 83 Ferrari, and Yernej Simoncic is just looking incredibly self-assured through Parabolica there and continues to open up the gap to over 5 seconds over his BMW pseudo teammate in the form of Michi Hoyer.
Yeah, meanwhile, Aurelian Bru has upped his pace a bit. He's back within a second of Daniele Farinelli then. Can Farinelli in that number 2 Cadillac get his best result of the season so far in 6th? That would be a huge deal for the Italian then, but the Frenchman Bru is throwing absolutely everything, kitchen sink at all, and look how wet it is. The sink is overflowing at Monza then as we go into the final 3 minutes here, and Farinelli, we've not seen him tested like this quite before in this championship, but Aurelian Bru, who was 4th in the wet conditions at Sebring, we know he's one of those drivers that really excels in these conditions. Farinelli, loses the rear end and spins at the red Ophelio and then rejoins right into the path of Aurelian Bru. That was a slam dunk and a half if I've ever seen it. But flashing his lights, Aurelian Bru, he is not happy that Farinelli decided, he saw he'd lost the rear end and decided to almost tactically delay Aurelian Bru there. But surely that's done a bit of damage to at least Farinelli, who actually pulls off to the inside and lets Aurelian Bru through. Recognizes a bit of a mea culpa moment there. So actually good sportsmanship from Farinelli there. Recognizes that he did wrong there and trying to rectify his mistake.
Yeah, the Cadillac drivers swapping places now, so that puts Aurelian Bru into the 6th position. Daniele Farinelli, you can demote down to 7th now. Not too far back, well, pretty far back, is Kacper Mariansky and Bert Knopson, the pair of Porsches, a little bit further back. Excuse me. And now Sebastian Wunsch has continued to lose just the tiniest bit of time to Callum Cripps. Cripps really good through the center of the corner through the first chicane there, but not able to get off of the corner quite so well. And 0.3 of a second that last lap was the difference in lap time. So Callum Cripps a little bit faster that time, potentially going to try to get that position here, but I really think he's running out of time. 1:45 remaining.
Yeah, his charges has come from a little bit too far back on the grid, but look how much curb he's taking. Remember, the track limits for the GT3s are a little bit less strict in the sprint races compared to the endurance events, but it's not hot by a whole lot. You get 5 points instead of 3, and we saw Callum Cripps having a little moment where he cut that Del Roger chicane earlier. 1.4 seconds is the gap, so Wunsch really struggling actually through the Lesmo corners there with a minute left to go, and Wunsch just needs to hold on here. He's done an absolutely fantastic job in a car in treacherous conditions, in a car that's not been the quickest today, the only Ferrari in the field, but he is going to take a win at Ferrari's home race here at Monza, is the German Sebastian Wunsch. And Callum Cripps, he has really done the absolute most that he could, has overtaken everybody apart from Wunsch in this race. As we see through goes the Cadillac then as we go into the final 50 seconds then. So they're going to get one more lap, these two, as Simoncic is surely going to come through to at least overtake them to start his final lap as well.
Yeah, he's not quite going to get away with knocking one lap off of the total here. 40 seconds, 30 seconds now remaining as we see somebody spinning ahead. It's one of the Cadillacs, one of the gold number 3 Cadillacs very nearly.
Quidel again.
Once again.
And he's just in front of the pit entry. He's sideways there, so surely he's going to come in. And what a miserable race it's been for Gaetan Cuidel. In such tricky conditions, he has just really struggled to keep that car pointing in a straight line. And Seb Wunsch, oh, so close to the end. This is where it's going to be so tense for him now. Simoncic is going to go around the outside of both of them, and it's going to take a couple more hypercars with him as well. Hoyer about 3 seconds in a race, got Rockcheck about 2 seconds behind. So Davin Rockcheck, I think, also similarly to Callum Cripps, his challenge has come just a bit too late. Julian Guerin now trying to
lose some time.
Oh, Julian Guerin. Oh, Seb Wunsch has to cut the corner. Oh, and this could really hurt him now because, there we go, Callum Cripps lets through Michi Hoyer now, and he's going to have to do the same for Davin Rockcheck in quick succession here. Simoncic just a sector away from taking his third win of the season as Seb Wunsch has to back right off, and Callum Cripps will be getting as close as he can to the back of that Lamborghini. Somewhere in the spray is the GT3 class leader, Seb Wunsch there, but Callum Cripps so near yet so far. And he's just wishing, oh, if only I had just a little something that I could throw left at Seb Wunsch, but I've not got any time to use it here. Seb Wunsch, oh, just about makes it into Ascari. So nearly throwing it off the road there. They're running so low on grip on those wet tyres at this point, but just one more corner to go for Jene Simoncic. He won at Le Mans a week ago. He won at Spa. He's going to take his first sprint win of the season that puts him right in the mix in the sprint championship. It means he pulls clear of Michi Hoyer in the overall standings. Out of the Parabolica he goes now, and it's Jene Simoncic, winner here of the sprint race at Monza. Hoyer will finish second in Hypercar with Rockcheck completing the podium. Good recovery from him. Seb Wunsch is going to just hold on to take his second win in a row after Le Mans a week ago then. And look, side by side, it's Prendergast past Manningen, and that's going to be crucial for the championship to limit the damage that Wunsch can do to him. But Manningen loses out on the last lap of the race. Mariansky laps the pair at them. And oh, Manningen trying to go up the inside, and Ascari well over the curb there. Prendergast surely will escape now from the Corvette there. But yeah, Prendergast absolutely did not give up there, despite everything in this race going wrong for him. He is going to get something out of it of 18th position, which I believe is about 5th in the overall order there. So Valtteri Manningen misses out then on a chance to match Corvette's best finish of the season. Bertnops slips up the inside of Prendergast. Bertnops is going to finish, and there we go, confirmation. Prendergast will cross the line in 5th. And full credit, by the way, to Michel Rodriguez. He was about 30 seconds down on our two leaders, but that was a fantastic result for him. And Zach Vermaak, though, sadly, he was the driver running 4th for quite a lot of the race. He's going to lose out and have to settle for 8th then. Still his best result of the season so far, but great to see Zach Vermaak back in the picture. But I think in these challenging conditions, a lot of these drivers did well just to get to the end without hitting too much trouble then.
Yeah, and you have to feel heartbroken for Fabien Ballet, who had some just fantastic pace at the front of the field, but unfortunately will finish last of the drivers. He was able to reconnect after. Yep, absolutely. So was able to reconnect, and we saw him rolling around a little bit in the kind of alternate skin that was the Porsche 911 he was driving. But you got to feel bad for Fabien Ballet after having such a strong qualifying and such a strong start to the race. Finds himself 10th in the into the standings at the end of the race here.
So then, it was close in the end, wasn't it? But Callum Cripps made up a 7-8 second deficit, I think, from the early phases to be just 9 tenths behind over the checkered flag, Sebastian Wunsch. And Wunsch, I believe, with that result for Prendergast, may yet be our new championship leader then. He's certainly gained a lot of ground in the last week or so, hasn't he? But that was a fantastic performance from both Wunsch and Cripps. Cripps getting his first podium, along with Michel Rodriguez, who triumphed in that really, really close battle with Valtteri Manningen, Luca Fingard, and Regan Mitchell, of course, who recovers to 4th, just 4 seconds behind Michel Rodriguez. Kieran Prendergast, certainly the first instant that lost him the lead. He had a brilliant start. The first instant, I think, with Jules Neal hitting him, or somebody certainly hit him, and he lost several positions there. But the second incident, speeding in the pit lane, I'm afraid he really only has himself to blame for that particular one. But nonetheless, did get past Vautu Manninen at the death there with a really, really bold overtake on the run from Lesmo 2 towards Ascari. Manninen, his best result this season in 6th, 54 seconds down on the lead, with Luca Fingard a minute off the lead in 7th. Zach Vermack in the other BMW was 8th, and then Marcus Crawford, who had that huge crash at the beginning, nonetheless kept with it, finished a lap down. Fabian Ballet, sadly, disconnected from the lead, and he's certainly, the German, has not had a whole lot of luck on his side so far this season. 3 laps down in 10th. Meanwhile, in Hypercar, it's a 3rd win of the season, a 2nd win in a week for Jerne Simoncic after 35 laps of racing action. He really was in control of that race pretty much the whole way through from the start of it, with Michi Hoyer in 2nd, just holding off David Marukcek. So our top 3 in the championship in that order in the result here. Fabio Grigoletto, another 4th place for him. Didn't have to fight his way through quite as much of the pack as he did at Le Mans a week ago, but nonetheless, a good performance. Great battle with Amos Lorito as well over 4th there, with Lorito equaling his best result this season in 5th. Aurelian Bru did actually beat Daniele Farinelli, of course, in those closing stages, as Farinelli, a crucial mistake, losing the rear end, but he did show good sportsmanship to let Bru through. So Farinelli, I think, should be praised for a pretty clean race other than that incident, it must be said. Kappa Mariansky, also very good result for him. A minute down off the lead in 8th, ahead of Bert Knops. And then Marco De Bono, I think, after all the misfortune he suffered, to at least scrape into 10th position, 66 seconds down on the lead. I think Marco can feel, well, I did everything I could today. Julian Gurin, he, I think, had contact with another car that led to him finishing in 11th. Jules Neal spun out from 5th position out of the Ascari chicane. It's a case of really what could have been for Jules today. He was running as high as 3rd in the early stages. Gaëtan Quidel ends 3 laps down after several spins. Just did well to get to the end of that race. I think he's relieved that it's over. And then Clement Gagourde, sadly not meeting the checkered flag after misfortunes of his own. So, wow. Another exciting race then, Braden. But before I get your thoughts, let's get the thoughts of some of our GD3 field, starting with Callum Cripps, who, of course, finished 2nd. I'm sure it's a case of so near yet so far for Callum Cripps. Let's hear what he has to say then. So Callum Cripps joins us now in the commentary box. Callum, your best result this season, 2nd, but you were catching Sebastian Wunsch throughout that race. You put on a double overtake at one point as well, despite qualifying, I think, 6th or 7th on the grid. That was an amazing race, probably your best performance of the season so far, Callum. I know you're frustrated to finish just 9/10 off of victory, having had such a great comeback. But what are your thoughts on that one? Because that was crazy.
And it was realistically it should have been a P4 really, because Fabian and Kieran both had problems, but I know Kieran had a wheel failure basically. But yeah, so it should have been a P4. But happy with happy with P2. I should have won it. Got held up in the traffic quite a bit at certain points. So yeah, not too bad. I'm quite happy with it still.
Callum, was it a case of the McLaren just seemed like the better car to have in wet conditions at Monza, especially compared to the Ferrari? You just had that little bit more confidence carrying momentum through the chicane. So you certainly had to make Seb Wunsch work to hold on to that win then. And there are a couple of moments where the track limits were very, very marginal as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a bit like, it reminded me of doing karting years ago, where you had to literally just launch over the curbs just to get some grip, especially on the sausage curbs in the second chicane. But the McLaren was quicker in the drier conditions when it stopped raining in I'd say probably 40 minutes into the race. As soon as the rain started again, the Ferrari just seemed to be even. But yeah, for McLaren for sure. Probably I was running quite low wing still. It was pretty much a dry setup on wets. So yeah, didn't have much time to change things around really. But yeah, so it was really quick in a straight line. Lesmo 1 and 2 still really tricky. But yeah, it was good fun. I was very happy with it.
Ah, brilliant to hear that. You talking about karting reminds me that last night I was at Sandown Park in Isha, freezing my
Okay.
toes off commentating on Elite Karting Series, so
Yeah, I decided
for several hours.
karting winter series are not the one, so I'll stick to stick to the summer stuff.
Wise choice. My toes agree with you, but but anyway, yeah, no rest for the commentators at least. But thank you for talking to us, Callum. I guess this is going to do your championship a world of good, of course, and I'm sure that's not the last time we're going to see you on the podium. But congrats on that first podium, and hard luck on missing out on the win. But nonetheless, you pulled, I think, the move of the race as well when you got past Maninen and. Was it Michelle Rodriguez? I think in one move at Lesmo one as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I was sick. That was a big old send. Go for it or bust. So yeah, it was good fun.
Yeah, you certainly had to judge that one well. But anyway, Callum, congratulations on your second place of best result this season so far. And we look forward to seeing you back in action in a week's time at Fuji. And we wish you the best of luck for that encounter as well.
Thanks, Ed. Cheers.
So then, as Callum Cripps exits commentary box, let's hear from Kieran Prendergast then. Ultimately, he finished 5th today, but it was a day that promised so much more for Kieran. Kieran, I know that was a very, very painful result for you, of course, leading early on. And Callum told us there was a wheel failure while you were leading Fabian Ballet after the opening couple of laps then. So scary moment for you, but you nonetheless were able to get back in the race and still salvage some points on a day where everything seemed to go against you. There was also a penalty for speeding in the pit lane as well. Sum up your thoughts now. I know you must be really, really frustrated, but you did at least get past Manningen right at the end to at least get back into the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, leading the race, had good pace, was pulling a gap behind as well, and then all of a sudden I was stuck in 5th gear. And then obviously I was thinking, why is this happening? You know, sort of looking at changing things and whatnot. So in the end, I did I had to turn the wheel off. And then
Factory reset.
Yeah, factory reset, and then went straight into the barrier, got a bit of damage. And then, you know, the gears started working, the wheel started working, reset the force feedback, and then, you know, away I go. And then got into a bit of a battle, got myself up into P3, went into the pits, and as I was about to come out, a hypercar came out. And
Aurelian Brew was right in front of you, wasn't he? Yeah,
yeah, and I think obviously it was, you could say an unsafe release from myself, but there wasn't much I could do about it. And then it gave me, I think the contact stopped the pit limiter for some reason. So yeah, basically just got a penalty, had to serve that, and then yeah, made my life 10 times harder. But we've got Fuji next week, and hopefully this time it's a win, because you know today couldn't have been any more certain. But one of those things, isn't it? This is racing, it's sim racing, and unfortunately, you know,
I feel like I am probably mostly responsible for the bad luck you had today, Kieran, because I described the Kieran Prendergast curse of being yet to take a win. But
yeah, the thing is, I think once I break the curse, I think I should be I should be good for, you know, getting more wins under the belt. But yeah.
Does it concern you that Seb Vunch won today? That's 2 wins in the space of a week then for your main title rival then. Seb, he's the only one left really, isn't he?
Yeah, so obviously you've got a few more tracks. We have Fuji, Kota, and then Bahrain. So I mean I wouldn't say I'm worried as much, but I think it's just more or less staying consistent and making sure we bring in the results as well. GG's to Seb today for the win, you know. But I think obviously what we're gonna have to do is go back to the drawing board, check hardware, because I streamed as well and it didn't. Yeah, so that died during quali, and that was one of the reasons why I feel like I was out qualified, because I was getting stuttering the whole lap, and I was mentioning that to my teammate Callum then, and you managed to get that sorted out. And then obviously faced with more issues in the race as well. But I think Seb's actually leading the championship so far after today's race. But,
yeah, he was about like 8 points behind, wasn't he, going in, or 13 or 8 points, something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Depending on whether you look at the sprint standings or the endurance standings or the overall standings.
Yeah. But I think obviously going into Fuji, it's just gonna have to be full send, I think, and make sure that we get the result in as well. So bit gutted, but it is what it is. It's racing.
In an eventful day, I think of all the drivers, you had probably one of the most eventful races with all the problems, and that is saying something considering some of the adventures our Hypercar field had as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sure you're gonna, like you say, pick yourself back up and have another go at Fuji. And me and Braden, I think everyone here at VMS wishes you the very, very best of luck, not just in your quest for a win, but your quest for the GD3 title, Kieran, because certainly you didn't quite get the result you deserved today, but the more you persevere, the more likely it is that things will turn around once again.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, guys, and take care.
Cheers, Kieran. So then, very, very interesting to hear Kieran Prendergast's thoughts on that race, but his perseverance, his persistence really stood out to me, Braden. Never gave up right to the end with that move on Mannon, and despite everything going against him, more misfortune, I think, than mistakes from his side, certainly. Monza there today, and on top of the rain, on top of the tyre situation, he had plenty to deal with.
Yeah, and truly, he had the spirit of the race and of racing. You certainly, no matter who you are, really watching these races, you have to kind of root for him at least a little bit to get a win before season's end, regardless of the ultimate results in the championship. You've just got to be. He's one of those guys that you just root for to have success. He's a great guy and truly a great racer. It's just a matter of putting all those puzzle pieces together, and hopefully next week in Fuji, he'll be standing top of the podium.
Well, you never know. Let's try not to jinx him this time, Abram. But
Yeah, knock on wood.
But yeah, that of course will be Fuji on February 16th, and who knows? Maybe any of our Hypercar field might be up for an interview one of these days, come the end of the season. But yeah, we are going into our final few rounds. Fuji, of course, a tri-ultimate overall round, but a penultimate sprint event as well. And I'm sure Seb Vunch will be hoping to make it 3 in a row, but Kieran Prendergast could very well strike back there. And of course, we already visited Fuji in the Contender Championship a couple of weeks ago with a couple of fantastic fights there. So if that was anything to go by, we're in for a treat in the Pro Championship. But anyway, that is pretty much all we have to cover then from Monza. Of course, we've still got another round of Contender, I think, to come next Friday. So I forget where exactly that's going to be, but I did say at the end of the Contender stream. There we go. Nick has got it on standby. It is of course, the 4th round of Contender, the Sebring International Raceway 100-minute race. So if you want an extra 10-minute long race at the track that we saw so much action at earlier in the VMS Pro Series, then tune in next Friday for that. But if you want next round of VMS Pro itself proper, you've got to wait till Fuji next Sunday, of course, as I say, February 16th. But yeah, anyway, congratulations once again to Jene Simoncic, who's just looking more and more like the man to beat in Hypercar, and to Seb Vunch, who's dramatically taken the championship lead after that close, tense battle in the finish with Callum Cripps so nearly beating him. It was a fantastic, a red-letter day, I think, for Callum Cripps today. But yeah, Kieran Prendergast, his luck has got to turn around sooner or later. We'll have to see what happens next time out at Fuji. But from me, Edward Hunter, from him, Braden Hill, and from broadcast director Nicolas Domino, thank you very much for watching the 5th round of VMS Pro, and tune in next week for round 6 at Fuji. Bye for now.